The final words she spoke to me as a wife hung in the air of our hallway, colder and sharper than any shard of glass. "It would be just one night with my dream man," Clara said, adjusting the strap of a dress I had never seen before, a shimmering thing that cost more than my first truck. She wasn't asking for permission. It was a declaration, a statement of fact as casual as telling me we were out of milk. She looked at me, her eyes holding a mixture of pity and defiance, and then she left. The click of the door latch was the sound of a guillotine blade falling. Have you ever had a moment so quiet and so loud at the same time that it permanently alters the landscape of your memory? My name is Mark. I'm 42 years old, and for the last 15 of those years, I've been a husband. By trade, I'm a carpenter, a woodworker. I build custom furniture, things that are meant to last for generations. I find a deep satisfaction in taking a raw piece of maple or walnut and shaping it into something of purpose and beauty. It's a quiet life, a methodical one. It was, I thought, a good life. But let me start from the beginning. Clara and I met in our mid-20s. I was just starting my business out of a rented garage, my hands perpetually calloused and smelling of sawdust. She was working as a receptionist at a real estate agency, and she was, to me, the most vibrant person I had ever met. She had a laugh that could fill a room and an ambition that burned like a furnace. I thought we balanced each other. My quiet steadiness was the foundation for her soaring spirit. For years, it seemed to work. I built my business piece by piece, board by board. We bought a small house. We lived a simple, comfortable life. But over time, a subtle discontent began to seep into our home. It started with magazines left open on the coffee table, pages showing sprawling mansions and exotic vacations. Then came the social media accounts, endless scrolling through the curated lives of her friends. Each post a small, sharp jab at the life I provided. Her friend Megan married a surgeon. Another, Jessica, married a tech entrepreneur. Their lives were a whirlwind of charity galas, European holidays, and designer handbags. Our life was quiet evenings, weekend trips to the lake, and the satisfaction of a well-made dovetail joint. "Mark, did you see the pictures from Jessica's trip to Greece?" she would ask, holding her phone up like an indictment. It must be nice not to have to worry about money. I never knew how to respond. We didn't have to worry about money. We were comfortable. I had built my business carefully, reinvesting profits, making shrewd if unglamorous investments in commercial properties through a holding company I'd set up years ago. I never talked about it much. It wasn't the kind of thing Clara was interested in. To her, my work was a quaint hobby that happened to pay the bills. She saw my hands, stained with varnish and marked with the occasional scar, and saw a laborer, not a creator or a provider. She saw the sawdust on my boots and smelled failure, not progress. Her mother, Eleanor, did little to help. She was a woman who measured a man's worth by the brand of his watch and the zip code of his address. Whenever she visited, she would survey our modest home with a look of profound disappointment. "Clara, darling, you have such exquisite taste," she'd say, loud enough for me to hear from the next room. "It's a shame to see it so constrained." She would encourage Clara's spending, taking her on shopping trips that would leave our credit card statements smoking. I was always the one who had to gently pull the reins, to be the voice of reason, which only cast me further into the role of the killjoy, the man holding her back from her true potential. The discontent festered. Our conversations became minefields of unspoken resentments. The physical distance between us grew until the king-sized bed felt like a vast, empty tundra. I kept working, kept building, hoping that my quiet dedication would eventually be enough. I thought love was about loyalty, about building something solid together, weathering the storms. I was a fool. I was building a fortress of love and commitment while she was secretly packing her bags to flee. The catalyst for the end was a man named Julian Croft. He was everything I was not. A senior partner at a high-flying investment firm, he was polished, wore tailored suits, and drove a German sports car. Clara had met him at some fundraiser one of her friends had dragged her to. For weeks, his name was all I heard. "Julian says the market is about to turn." Julian took his clients to a private box at the stadium. Julian's firm just leased the entire top floor of the new glass tower downtown. Each mention was a comparison, and in each one, I was found wanting. Then came that final evening. I came home from the workshop, tired but satisfied after finishing a complex commission. A 10-foot-long dining table made from a single slab of reclaimed oak. I was looking forward to a quiet dinner, maybe watching a movie. I found Clara in the bedroom, zipping up that shimmering silver dress. She was wearing jewelry I didn't recognize, and her makeup was perfect. "Are we going somewhere?" I asked, confused. She didn't turn around. "I'm going out," she said, her voice flat. With friends, a cold knot formed in my stomach. "You didn't mention anything?" "It was a last-minute thing." She finally turned to face me. She looked beautiful, and it hurt. She looked like a stranger who had wandered into my house. "It's the Children's Hospital Gala. Julian invited me. His date canceled, the name just hung there. Julian. So you're going to a gala? With him? Mark, don't be like that." She sighed, a familiar wave of condescension in her tone. "It's for charity. It's networking. It's important. It's a date, Clara." That's when she walked past me, into the hallway, grabbing a small, glittery clutch from the console table. I followed her, my heart beginning a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. This was it. This was the moment everything changed. I could feel it in the air. She paused at the front door, her hand on the knob. She looked back at me, her expression unreadable for a moment before it settled into that strange, pitying resolve. "Look," she began, her voice softening into a tool of manipulation. "He's everything I've ever wanted in a man. The success, the ambition, the lifestyle. I just need to know what it's like. I need to get it out of my system." I just stared at her, unable to form words. The sheer, unmitigated audacity of it was breathtaking. "It would be just one night with my dream man," she said, the words delivered with the finality of a judge's sentence. "A fantasy. And then I can come back here. I can come back to this, and I can try to be happy. I need this, Mark." She didn't wait for a reply. She opened the door, and the sound of an expensive car engine idling at the curb filled the silence. Then she was gone. The door clicked shut, and I was left alone in the hallway of the house I had built with my own hands. A house that had suddenly ceased to be a home. It was just a structure, a collection of wood and nails and empty spaces. I stood there for a long time. I didn't shout. I didn't punch a wall. The anger I expected to feel never arrived. In its place was a profound and unsettling calm. It was the calm of a surgeon before a complex operation, the calm of an engineer realizing a critical flaw in a design. The emotional part of my brain simply shut down, and the logical, methodical part took over. The part that measured twice and cut once. The part that knew how to deconstruct something to its base components to see how it was made, and how it could be unmade. I walked into the kitchen, filled the kettle, and set it on the stove to boil. As I waited for the whistle, I looked at the wedding photograph on the fridge. It was of two young people, smiling and hopeful, entirely ignorant of the quiet betrayals and slow erosions that lay ahead. I felt a pang of sadness for the man in that picture. He had believed in promises. He had believed in forever. He had been a romantic. I took the photo off the fridge, looked at it one last time, and dropped it into the kitchen trash can. The man in that photo was gone. Someone else was here now. Someone colder, clearer, and far more patient. The kettle screamed. I made my tea, sat down at the oak table I had built for us, and took out my phone. I didn't scroll through social media. I didn't look for pictures of the gala. I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. David Chun. We had been friends since high school. While I had gone into the trades, he had gone to law school. He was now a partner at one of the city's most ruthless corporate law firms. He specialized in hostile takeovers and corporate litigation. I figured this qualified. He answered on the second ring, his voice sharp and alert even late in the evening. "Mark, everything okay?" "David," I said, my own voice steady, devoid of emotion. "I need your help. I need a lawyer." There was a pause on the other end. David knew me. He knew I wasn't a man given to drama. What happened? I told him. I recounted the conversation with Clara, using her exact words. I described the look on her face, the click of the door. I left nothing out. When I was finished, the silence on the line was heavy. Finally, David spoke, his voice losing its friendly tone and taking on the clipped precision of his profession. Okay, Mark, listen to me very carefully. The first thing you're going to do is nothing. Do not call her. Do not text her. Do not engage. When she comes back, you will be polite, distant, and non-committal. Your ignorance and your silence are now your most powerful weapons. She expects you to get angry, to yell, to beg. You will do none of those things. You will become a gray rock. A gray rock, I repeated. Exactly. Uninteresting. Unresponsive. Let her spin out. Let her reveal her entire strategy. In the meantime, you and I have work to do. Meet me at my office. Tomorrow morning. 8 o'clock. And Mark, he added, his voice firm, do not do anything without talking to me first. This is not a marriage anymore. This is a business negotiation. And you are going to win. I hung up the phone. A business negotiation. The words resonated with me. I understood business. I understood materials, stress points, leverage, and structural integrity. Clara had just revealed a fatal structural flaw in our marriage, and I was about to conduct a thorough and methodical demolition. The turning point wasn't a moment of rage. It was a decision, a quiet, cold, and calculated choice to stop feeling and start planning. The carpenter was about to become an architect of her downfall. The next morning, I was at David's office at 7:45. The firm occupied 3 floors of a downtown skyscraper, a world of glass, steel, and quiet, expensive ambition. David's office had a panoramic view of the city, including a clear line of sight to the new glass tower where Julian Croft's firm was located. Felt fitting. David was all business. He had a yellow legal pad in front of him and a pen in his hand. Okay, he said, skipping the pleasantries. Finances. Tell me everything. And I mean everything. Every account, every asset, every investment. Especially the ones she doesn't know about. For the next hour, I laid it all out. I explained the structure of my business. The custom furniture shop, which was a sole proprietorship and generated a decent, respectable income, the one Clara knew about. Then I told him about Oak and Iron Holdings, the LLC I had formed a decade ago. It was the vehicle for all my real estate investments. I had started small, buying a duplex, then a small commercial building, rolling the profits into larger and larger properties. Clara had no idea. She saw the tax returns from the woodworking business, which I filed separately. The holding company's business was handled by a different accountant, its mail sent to a post office box. It was my nest egg, my security for the future. I had always planned to surprise her with it upon retirement, to show her that the quiet carpenter had built them an empire. The irony was a bitter pill. David listened intently, scribbling notes. When I mentioned that Oak and Iron owned the building at 1200 Financial Avenue, he stopped writing and looked up at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. 1200 Financial? The new glass tower. I nodded. Top to bottom, David let out a low whistle. Julian Croft's firm, Croftwood Capital, is the anchor tenant, aren't they? They lease the top 2 floors. They do, I confirmed. And they're 3 months behind on their rent. David leaned back in his leather chair and steepled his fingers. The smile was gone, replaced by the look of a predator that had just caught the scent of its prey. Mark, my friend, he said slowly, this is better than I could have imagined. We are not going to be playing defense. We are going on the attack. He outlined the strategy. First, hire a private investigator. We needed to document Clara's affair and, more importantly, her spending. We needed to establish a pattern of financial infidelity, the dissipation of marital assets. Second, we needed to legally insulate Oak and Iron. He would draft documents to solidify its standing as a premarital and separately maintained asset, using the clear financial trail to prove it. Third, I was to continue my gray rock strategy at home. Be a ghost in my own house. She will get frustrated, David warned. She'll try to provoke you. She needs you to be the villain of her story, the angry, controlling husband. You must not give her that. You will be calm. You will be reasonable. You will be a saint. And it will drive her absolutely insane. I left his office with a clear plan. The hurt was still there, a cold, heavy stone in my gut, but it was now surrounded by purpose. I met with the private investigator that afternoon, a former cop named Frank with tired eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. I gave him Clara's information, Julian's name, and a credit card. I want everything, I told him. Photos, financial trails, timelines. Be discreet, he nodded. You got it. They always think they're the first ones to be this clever. When I got home that evening, Clara was there. She was sitting on the couch, still in her clothes from the day before, minus the gala dress. She looked tired and irritable. She had been expecting, I think, either a vacant house or a furious confrontation. My quiet, calm entry threw her off balance. So you're here, she said, her voice laced with accusation. I live here, I replied simply, walking to the kitchen to get a glass of water. Aren't you going to say anything? Aren't you going to yell at me? I turned and looked at her, my expression neutral. About what? You made a choice. You're an adult. I'm tired, Clara. I'm going to take a shower. I left her sitting there, her mouth slightly agape. I could feel her frustration radiating from the other room. David was right. My calm was a more effective weapon than any rage could ever be. I maintained this composure for the next 3 weeks. I slept in the guest room. I was polite and distant. We were roommates sharing a mortgage. I went to the workshop every day, losing myself in the scent of cedar and the hum of my lathe. On the surface, I was the same man. Inside, I was a general preparing for war. Frank, the PI, was worth every penny. He delivered his first report a week later in a plain manila envelope. It was a methodical documentation of Clara's double life. Pictures of her and Julian kissing outside a downtown restaurant. Credit card statements showing thousands of dollars spent on hotel rooms, designer clothes, and expensive dinners, all charged to a joint account that was technically marital property. The one night was a lie. They had been seeing each other for at least 4 months. The report also contained a preliminary background check on Julian Croft. He lived in a rented penthouse, leased his fancy car, and had a string of bad debts and a very questionable history with his previous investment firm. He wasn't a financial wizard. He was a con man with good suits. Armed with this information, David and I made our next move. We drafted a post-nuptial agreement that clearly delineated all assets, separating oak and iron completely from the marital pool. Then, David had my property management company send an official default notice to Croftwood Capital regarding their overdue lease payments. The first pieces were moving into place on the board. Clara's behavior grew more erratic. My passivity was unnerving her. She started fights over trivial things, the way I loaded the dishwasher, a bill I'd forgotten to pay. She was trying to get a reaction, any reaction, that she could use against me. I refused to take the bait. I can't live like this, Mark, she screamed one night. It's like living with a robot. Say something. What would you like me to say, Clara? I asked calmly. I don't know. Get mad. Tell me you hate me. Anything is better than this. This nothing. I don't hate you, I said, and it was the truth. I just don't know you anymore. That was when she finally escalated. A week later, I was served with divorce papers at my workshop. I read them over in the quiet of my office, the scent of sawdust in the air. Her demands were breathtaking in their audacity. She wanted the house, full ownership. She wanted half of my woodworking business, which she valued at an absurdly high number. And she wanted alimony payments that would have crippled me, had the workshop been my only source of income. It was a declaration of total war. Her lawyer was a notorious bulldog known for tearing husbands to shreds in court. She thought she was holding all the cards. She thought I was a simple carpenter she could crush under the heel of her ambition. She had no idea that I was the one who owned the casino. Her mother called me the day after I was served. Mark, I hear Clara has finally come to her senses, Eleanor said, her voice dripping with venomous satisfaction. I hope for your sake you don't make this difficult. A man in your position can't afford a messy legal battle. Just give her what she deserves and be done with it. I fully intend to give Clara exactly what she deserves, Eleanor. I replied, and then I hung up. David and I filed our response. We agreed to mediation. Clara's lawyer, eager for a quick and bloody victory, accepted immediately. The meeting was set for 2 weeks later at a neutral law firm's office. During those 2 weeks, the world Clara was trying to build began to crumble. Frank's second report was a bombshell. Julian's firm was not just in financial trouble. It was a Ponzi scheme. He was using new investor money to pay off old ones. The Securities and Exchange Commission had opened an investigation. Frank had a source who confirmed that indictments were imminent. Julian was a rat on a sinking ship, and he was about to start looking for a lifeboat. Clara, oblivious, continued her fantasy. She moved out of the house and, according to Frank, into Julian's rented penthouse. The spending escalated. She was furnishing her new life, convinced that her divorce settlement would be a windfall. She was burning through her own savings and racking up debt, further solidifying our case for dissipation of assets. The day of the mediation arrived. It was a gray, overcast morning. I wore a simple suit, one I usually reserved for funerals and weddings. David was in his element, a picture of calm, lethal competence. We walked into the conference room and found Clara, her lawyer, and her mother already seated. Clara looked smug, radiating a confidence that was built on a foundation of lies and ignorance. Eleanor looked at me as if I were something she'd scraped off her shoe. "Let's get this over with," Clara's lawyer, a man named Henderson, began. "My client's demands are outlined in our petition. They are non-negotiable." David smiled faintly. He slid a single folder across the polished mahogany table. "Before we discuss your client's demands, perhaps we should look at her contributions to the marital estate. Or rather, her withdrawals." Henderson opened the folder. Inside was a stack of documents. The first page was a credit card statement in Clara's name, detailing thousands of dollars in charges at luxury boutiques and five-star hotels. The second was a bank statement from a joint account, showing a wire transfer of $50,000 to an account held by Julian Croft. The third was a photograph. It was a crystal-clear image, taken by Frank, of Clara and Julian on the balcony of his penthouse, locked in a passionate embrace. The date stamp was from 3 months prior. Clara's face went white. She snatched the photo from the table. "Where did you get this? You've been spying on me." "It's called discovery, Clara," David said calmly. "And this is just the appetizer." Henderson's smug demeanor vanished. He looked at Clara, then back at the documents. "My client was under emotional distress," he started, but his voice lacked conviction. "Emotional distress that required a $50,000 gift to her lover?" David countered. "A lover, I might add, who is currently the subject of a federal fraud investigation." Clara's head snapped toward her lawyer. "That's a lie!" she shrieked at David. "Is it?" David slid another document across the table. It was a copy of the official default notice sent to Croftwood Capital for their failure to pay rent at 1200 Financial Avenue. "Perhaps you should ask your boyfriend why he's about to be evicted from his office." Clara's bravado shattered. The color drained from her face, replaced by a blotchy red panic. She looked at her mother, who for the first time appeared uncertain. The foundations of their shared delusion were cracking. This was the first tremor. The meeting ended shortly after that. Henderson asked for a recess to confer with his client. We walked out, leaving them in the conference room. I could hear Clara's raised, panicked voice through the thick wooden door. That evening, my phone rang. It was Clara. Her voice was completely different. The arrogance was gone, replaced by a desperate, wheedling tone. "Mark, can we talk? We have lawyers for that now, Clara." "No, please," she begged. "I went to see Julian. He's gone. His apartment is empty. He won't answer his phone. Mark, I made a mistake. Terrible mistake. I was foolish. I was listening to the wrong people." I could hear Eleanor in the background, coaching her. "We can fix this. I can come home. We can forget any of this ever happened. It was a pathetic, transparent plea. Her fantasy had evaporated. Her support system had vanished. And now she was crawling back, expecting me to be the same reliable doormat she had left behind. "No, Clara," I said, my voice flat and final. "We can't. Some things, once they're broken, can't be fixed. They can only be cleared away." I hung up the phone. The desperation in her voice gave me no pleasure, only a profound sense of melancholy for the years I had wasted loving a woman who was, at her core, a complete stranger. The final meeting was scheduled a month later. It wasn't a mediation. It was a settlement conference in front of a retired judge. Clara's team had been stonewalling, refusing to accept our settlement offer, which was, David had assured me, far more generous than she deserved. She was still clinging to the hope that she could paint me as the villain and walk away with a fortune. We entered the judge's chambers. The atmosphere was formal and tense. Clara was there with Henderson and her mother. She looked haggard. The designer clothes were gone, replaced by a drab pantsuit. She refused to look at me, staring a hole in the wall behind my head. Henderson began, launching into a tirade about my supposed financial deception, my emotional cruelty, my attempts to leave his client destitute after 15 years of marriage. He painted a picture of Clara as a devoted wife who had supported my fledgling business and was now being cast aside. When he was finished, the judge looked at David. "Your response." David stood up. He didn't raise his voice. He simply began to lay out the facts, one by one, like a carpenter laying a foundation. He presented the evidence of the affair, the documented proof of the dissipation of marital assets, the lies, the deception. With each document he placed on the table, I could see Clara shrink a little more in her chair. "And now," David said, his voice dropping slightly, "we come to the matter of Mr. Miller's assets, which Mr. Henderson claims have been hidden from his client." He placed a thick, bound portfolio on the table. "This is the complete financial disclosure of Oak and Iron Holdings, LLC, an entity Mr. Miller established 4 years prior to his marriage to your client. As you will see, it is and always has been his sole and separate property," Henderson scoffed. "A small-time property company. It's irrelevant, is it?" David opened the portfolio. "Let's review the holdings. A portfolio of commercial and residential properties valued, as of the last quarter, at approximately $54 million, a collective gasp came from the other side of the table. Clara's jaw dropped. Eleanor looked like she had been struck by lightning. Henderson's face was a mask of disbelief. "$54 million? Henderson stammered. "That's correct," David continued smoothly. "Which brings us to a particularly interesting asset." He turned a page. "The property at 1200 Financial Avenue. The tower where Croftwood Capital was a tenant. My client, Mr. Miller, is not just their landlord. He is the building's sole owner. He was, in effect, your client's lover's landlord." The room was utterly silent. The only sound was the quiet rustle of paper as David turned another page. Clara stared at me, her eyes wide with a dawning, horrified comprehension. She was seeing me for the first time. Not the simple carpenter covered in sawdust, but the man who held the keys to the kingdom she so desperately wanted to enter. The man she had discarded like a piece of trash. "The eviction of Croftwood Capital is complete," David stated. "Furthermore, evidence uncovered during that process has been turned over to the SEC and the District Attorney's Office. Warrants have been issued for Mr. Croft's arrest. He was apprehended this morning trying to board a flight to the Cayman Islands. The collapse was total and immediate." Clara made a small, choking sound. Her carefully constructed world, her entire sense of superiority, had been annihilated in the space of 5 minutes. The dream man was a criminal. The simple husband was a multimillionaire. Her grand betrayal was not a step up, but a leap off a cliff. The judge, a stern-faced woman who had seen everything, looked over the documents. She looked at Clara, her expression withering. "Given the evidence of gross financial misconduct and infidelity on the part of your client, Mr. Henderson, I am inclined to approve Mr. Miller's proposed settlement in its entirety. In fact, I believe he is being remarkably generous." The judgment was delivered. Clara would receive nothing. No house, No business. No alimony. Due to the assets she had squandered, she would be responsible for her own significant legal fees and credit card debt. She was leaving a 15-year marriage with less than nothing. That's when she finally broke. A raw, guttural sob escaped her lips. It wasn't a sound of sadness. It was a sound of pure, unadulterated loss. The loss of money, of status, of the future she felt she was owed. She turned on her mother. You told me he was nothing. You told me I deserved better. Eleanor, pale and trembling, could only stammer, I didn't know. I didn't stay to watch the rest. My part was done. I stood up, gave a slight, formal nod to the judge and turned to David. Thank you, I said quietly. He nodded once. I walked out of the chambers, not looking back. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I felt quiet. The quiet of a storm that has finally passed, leaving behind a clean, rain-washed silence. I didn't go home. The house was no longer my home. It was just a property to be sold. Instead, I drove to my workshop. I walked in and was greeted by the familiar, comforting smell of wood shavings and varnish. This place was real. This place was honest. The grain of a piece of cherry never lied. The strength of a mortise and tenon joint was a truth you could rely on. I walked over to my workbench, where a new project awaited. It was a block of beautiful, dark walnut, rich with complex figuring. I picked up my favorite hand plane, its blade honed to a razor's edge. I set the blade for a gossamer-thin shaving and pushed it across the surface of the wood. A perfect, translucent curl of wood rose from the plane. I did it again and again. The rhythmic, repetitive motion was a form of meditation. With each pass, I felt like I was smoothing away the scars of the past 15 years, revealing something new and clean underneath. I was reshaping my life just as I shaped the wood. Clara had measured value in dollars and brand names. She saw life as a performance, a competition for applause. I had always found value in substance, in integrity, in the things that were built to last. For a long time, I thought that included my marriage. I was wrong about that, but I was not wrong about the principle. Truth, loyalty, self-respect. These are the foundations you build a life on. Betrayal is like dry rot. It can hollow out the strongest-looking structure from the inside, leaving it waiting for the slightest pressure to collapse into dust. I had survived the collapse. Now it was time to build something new, something for myself on a foundation I knew was solid and true.